The wind roared against my scales, a symphony of violence that I had conducted for centuries. I was vast, a silhouette of obsidian and crimson against the moonlight, my wingspan capable of blotting out the stars above the kingdom of Ethelgard. Below me, the castle was a panicked anthill. Torches flickered, bells tolled in a frantic rhythm, and tiny arrows bounced harmlessly off my underbelly like rain. I tightened my grip. In my right claw, carefully caged by talons the size of ballista bolts, I held the prize. Princess Seraphina, the jewel of the realm. I had expected screaming. I had expected the thrashing of limbs, the hysterical pleading that usually accompanied the abductions of pampered royalty. I had kidnapped princes and princesses before, mostly for ransom, sometimes out of boredom, and occasionally because I liked the way their crowns looked in my hoard. They always screamed. They always begged. But the bundle in my claw was motionless. I banked left, catching a thermal current rising from the jagged spine of the ash peaks, leaving the chaotic screams of the capital far behind. The air grew thinner, colder, smelling of sulphur and ancient snow. She must have fainted, I thought, a flicker of disappointment rising in my chest. Fragile things, humans. They break before the game even begins. I descended toward the smoking spire, the highest peak where my lair lay hidden inside the crater of a dormant volcano. I flared my wings to break, the massive membranes catching the air with a sound like a cracking whip, and landed with a heaviness that shook the stone. I unclenched my talons. I lowered my snout, exhaling a puff of smoke that warmed the freezing alpine air, waiting to see the terrified scramble. The princess sat up. She didn't scramble. She didn't run. She adjusted her torn silk nightgown, shivered once in the mountain chill, and looked directly into my eye. Her eyes were not wide with terror. They were dull, resigned, like the surface of a lake that had frozen over long ago. She looked at me, a 40-foot dragon wreathed in smoke, and sighed. "Are you going to eat me now?" she asked. Her voice was small but steady. "Or do you prefer to cook me first?" I blinked, my inner eyelids sliding shut and open again. The audacity. I drew back, my form shivering as I invoked the magic that ran through my blood. The transformation was always painful, a cracking of bones and shifting of mass that felt like being untuned, unmade, and remade in an instant. The scales receded into skin, the wings folded and melted into shoulder blades, the snout retracted into a human face. In seconds, the dragon was gone. In its place stood Elise Vance. I was tall for a woman, imposing, with hair the color of spilled wine and eyes that retained the subtle reptilian slit of my true form, glowing amber in the dark. I wore leathers dyed black and red, spun from magic and necessity. I stalked toward her, bare feet ignoring the sharp obsidian gravel. I loomed over her, expecting her to flinch at my human form, which was often more unsettling to mortals than the beast. "I am not a savage," I said, my voice rasping with a residual heat. "I do not eat sentient creatures. It is bad for the digestion." The princess looked up at me. In the moonlight, she was painfully thin. Her blonde hair was matted, her skin pale as bone. There were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of years without rest. "Then why am I here?" she asked. "Because you are valuable," I sneered, circling her. "Your father, King Alaric, loves his gold. He will pay a mountain of it to get you back." Seraphina looked at me with a look I've never seen from a human before. A defeated amusement, as if I didn't know anything. Then she let out a dry, hollow laugh. It was a terrible sound to hear from someone so young, like broken wind chimes. She hugged her knees to her chest, looking away from me and out toward the dizzying drop of the cliff edge. "He won't pay," she whispered, "and I won't go back." "He is the king," I argued, annoyed that my terrifying presence was being ignored. "You are his heir." "I am his property," she corrected. She looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than resignation in her eyes. I saw a profound, exhausting relief. "And if you think he cares about his property more than his coin, you don't know him." She lay back on the cold stone, closing her eyes. "You can kill me if you want, dragon, but do not send me back. I would rather die in your fire than live in his castle." I stood there, the cold wind whipping my hair, stunned into silence. I was Elise Vance, the scourge of the north, the hoarder of treasures. I knew the smell of fear. But this girl smelled only of old blood and lavender soap. I frowned, confused by the sudden pang of curiosity in my chest. I reached down and grabbed her arm to haul her up, intending to drag her into the warmth of the caves. She flinched, a violent full-body flinch that made her gasp. I froze. My grip was light, barely a touch, but she had recoiled as if I had branded her. I looked at her arm. The sleeve of her nightgown had slipped. There, marring the pale skin, were bruises, some yellow and fading, some fresh and blooming purple, and beneath them the thin white lines of old scars. I looked at her face. She was squeezing her eyes shut, waiting for a blow. I let go of her arm, as if it was a red-hot iron. "Get up," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "It's cold. Inside. Now!" My lair was not a damp cave. It was a palace carved into the heart of the mountain. Magma flows were diverted through crystal glass tubes to provide light and heat, casting a warm golden glow over the vast chambers. The floors were covered in plush rugs woven by the finest artisans of fallen empires, and everywhere there was gold. Piles of coins, chalices, jeweled swords, and crowns. I was a dragon. We liked shiny things. I walked ahead, hearing the soft patter of Seraphina's bare feet behind me. We entered the main hall, a cavernous room filled with my hoard. I turned to see her reaction. Usually, captives gasped at the wealth. Seraphina didn't look at the gold. She looked at the fire. She walked straight toward the massive hearth I had carved into the wall and held her hands out to the flames. She was shivering violently now that the adrenaline had faded. "There is food," I said, gesturing to a table where a platter of fruits and smoked meats always sat, magically preserved. "Eat." She hesitated, looking at the food like it was a trap. "It's not poisoned," I snapped, my patience thinning. "If I wanted you dead, I'd have dropped you." She took a grape, then a slice of bread. Then she ate with a ravenous, trembling speed that told me she hadn't had a proper meal in days. I poured a goblet of wine and sat on my throne, a ridiculous thing made of melted shields, and watched her. "You said he wouldn't pay," I said, getting to the point. "Explain." Seraphina swallowed hard, wiping crumbs from her lip. She looked small in the vastness of my home. "King Alaric believes that fear is the only way to rule," she said quietly. "He rules the kingdom that way. He ruled his family that way." She pulled the sleeves of her gown down over her hands, and I saw those wounds again. My mother died trying to leave him. My brother ran away 3 years ago. I was the only one left to take the temper, to take the lessons. I felt a heat rising in my throat that had nothing to do with fire. Dragons were possessive, greedy, and often violent creatures, but we were not cruel. We did not break things for the joy of seeing them shatter. Our young have been hunted for generations. Of course, we treasured them in our own ways. "He beat you," I stated flatly. "He corrected me," she recited, the words clearly not her own. "For speaking out of turn, for smiling too much, for forgetting my place." She looked at me. He was arranging a marriage to the Duke of Verrington, a man 3 times my age who buries a wife every winter. That was set for tomorrow. She took a breath, her voice shaking. When I saw your shadow over the balcony, I didn't pray for safety. I prayed you would take me. I swirled the wine in my goblet, the red liquid catching the light. I had lived for 600 years. I had seen empires rise and fall. I had thought myself above the petty squabbles of humans. But looking at this broken, defiant girl, I felt a strange, ancient instinct uncurl in my belly. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't greed. It was the urge to guard. The memory of a lost one that I have buried under ash-burned fires long ago suddenly surfaced. You can sleep in the guest quarters, I said abruptly, standing up. Down the hall, 3rd door on the left. There are furs. It is warm. She stood up, looking wary. And the cell? The chains? I don't use chains, I said, turning my back to her so she wouldn't see the slit pupils of my eyes widening in anger at her father. The mountain is surrounded by cliffs. The only way down is flying. Unless you sprout wings, you are stuck here. I don't want to go down, she whispered. I paused. Humans and their ways of communication, always saying one thing with a brave face, but inwardly lying. Good. Then go to sleep, princess. Seraphina, she said. My name is Seraphina. Elise, I replied, glancing over my shoulder. I knew her name already, but for some reason the introduction stirred a small fire in my belly. They call me Elise Vance. 2 weeks passed. The ransom demand I sent, just to test her theory, was returned. Or rather, the messenger was returned, unharmed but empty-handed. The king's message was brief. The girl is damaged goods. Keep her. A new heir will be chosen. I crumbled the parchment in my hand, my skin rippling with scales as my temper flared. I incinerated the paper with a snap of my fingers. I didn't tell her about the note. Seraphina changed in those 2 weeks. The constant warmth of the volcano and the abundance of food began to fill out her hollow cheeks. She bathed in the hot springs deep in the caverns, washing away the grime of the castle. I gave her clothes from my hoard, silks from the east, velvet riding leathers that were far too big for hers, but which she cinched with a golden belt. She was quiet, moving through my lair like a ghost, but she was observant. I found her one afternoon in my library. I had amassed thousands of books over the centuries, piling them in a high-ceilinged chamber. She was sitting on the floor, reading a treatise on draconic history. It says here that dragons are incapable of love, she said, not looking up as I entered, that they only covet. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. Men write books to make themselves feel superior. They cannot understand that we do not love like short-lived mayflies. We love like the earth loves the mountains. We are permanent. She looked up, her blue eyes sharp. Do you covet me, Elise? Am I just another golden cup in your pile? I walked over to her, towering above her seated form. I reached out, and she didn't flinch this time. I tucked a strand of golden hair behind her ear. My skin was always running hot, a furnace beneath the surface, and I saw her lean slightly into the warmth. You are not a cup, I said softly. Cups do not read my books. Cups do not argue with me about the seasoning of the venison. I didn't argue, she smiled, a faint, tentative thing. I just said you use too much rosemary. Dragon senses, I scoffed, sitting down next to her. We need strong flavors. We sat in silence for a moment. Why haven't you hurt me? She asked suddenly. You're a monster. The stories say you burn villages. I burn armies, I corrected. I burn those who attack me. I am a dragon, Seraphina, not a sadist. There is a difference. I looked at her, holding her gaze. Your father? He is the monster. She looked down at her hands. He's coming for me, isn't he? Not because he wants me, but because you took what was his. Let him come, I growled, a low rumble that vibrated the floor. I have been bored. She reached out, her cool fingers brushing the back of my hand. He has mages. He has the black iron ballistas. I have fire, I said. And I have you. The words hung in the air, heavier than I intended. It happened gradually. It wasn't a sudden explosion of passion, but a slow erosion of walls. It was in the way she began to seek me out. She would bring her book to the main hall while I polished my scales in my half-shifted form. Wings spread out, tail dragging lazily, but human torso and face. She was fascinated by my hybrid form. Does it hurt? She asked one evening, tracing the line where soft skin gave way to obsidian scales on my shoulder. No, I murmured. Her touch sent shivers down my spine that had nothing to do with cold. It feels right, like stretching after a long sleep. She traced the ridge of a scale. You are beautiful, she whispered, terrifying, but beautiful. I turned to her. We were close. I could smell the lavender on her skin, hear the rapid beat of her human heart. You are not terrified, I noted. I ran out of fear a long time ago, she said. Now, I just feel safe. For the first time in my life, I am in the most dangerous place in the world, and I feel safe. I cupped her face. Her skin was so soft, so easily broken. The fragility of her terrified me more than any knight's lance. I will not let them take you, I vowed. I will burn the world to ash before I let you go back to that cage. She leaned forward and kissed me. It was tentative at first, a question. I froze, afraid I would burn her, afraid my strength would crush her. But she pressed closer, her hands tangling in my hair, demanding a response. I kissed her back. I kissed her with the hunger of a dragon, possessive and fierce, but careful. My hands roamed her back, feeling the ridges of the scars through her silk shirt, and I promised silently to replace every memory of pain with one of pleasure. When we broke apart, she was breathless, her cheeks flushed. I think, she whispered, resting her forehead against mine, that the books were wrong about dragons. 3 months after I took her, they came. I woke to the sound of horns echoing off the valley walls. Seraphina was asleep beside me, her head on my chest, her breathing even. I carefully disentangled myself, sliding out of the massive bed filled with furs. I walked to the balcony. Below, marching up the winding paths, was an army, not a rescue party, an invasion force. I saw the banners of Ethelgard, but also the banners of the Duke of Verrington. They had brought the black iron. Massive war machines were being hauled up the path, ballistas tipped with iron bolts enchanted to pierce dragon scales. Elise! I turned. Seraphina stood in the doorway, clutching a sheet to her chest. She looked pale. They're here, she said. It wasn't a question. Stay inside, I commanded, my voice dropping into the draconic register. Smoke began to curl from my lips. Do not come out, no matter what you hear. Elise, no! She ran to me, grabbing my arm. They have the mages. If you fly, they'll shoot you down. I am the storm of the north, I roared, the fear for her safety turning into rage. I do not hide in my hole like a badger. They don't want me, she cried. They want you, the Duke. He wants a trophy. My father wants the gold. I am just the excuse. I stopped. I looked at her wild eyes. Then I will give them nothing but fire, I said. I stepped off the balcony and fell. Mid-air, I let the magic tear through me. The explosion of wings snapped open, catching the air. I roared, a sound that shattered the ice on the peaks and sent the soldiers below stumbling. I dived. The battle was chaos. Arrows flew like gnats. I bathed the front lines in fire, turning the snow to steam and the stone to slag. But Seraphina was right. The mages. Bolts of lightning struck my side, finding the gaps in my scales. They were not aiming to kill me swiftly, they were aiming to cook me. I roared in pain, tail whipping around to crush a siege tower. Twang! A black iron bolt slammed into my shoulder. It didn't kill me, but it punched through the muscle, grounding my left wing. I crashed onto the lower plateau, sliding through the gravel, crushing soldiers beneath my weight. I struggled to rise, fire leaking from my maw. The Duke of Verrington rode forward on a white warhorse. He was a bloated, cruel-faced man in shining armor. "Beast," he shouted, "yield, give us the horde and the girl, and we will make your death quick," I snarled, preparing to unleash one final torrent of flame. "Stop!" The voice rang out clear and sharp, cutting through the din of battle. High above, on the ledge of my lair, stood Seraphina. She was wearing the red velvet riding leathers, and she held one of my jeweled swords. A blade too heavy for a normal woman, but she held it with 2 hands, the tip resting on the stone. "Seraphina!" the Duke bellowed. "Step away from the beast! We are here to save you!" "Save me?" Seraphina laughed. It was a dragon's laugh, full of scorn. "You are here to sell me. You are here to butcher." She pointed the sword down at them. "I am not your property, Verrington, and I am not your daughter, Alaric." "You are bewitched," a mage shouted. "I am awake," she screamed back. "If you want this dragon, you have to go through me." It was a bluff, a ridiculous, suicidal bluff. She was a human girl with a heavy sword against an army. But it bought me a second. The distraction made the mages look up. The hesitation made the Duke pause. I didn't waste it. I ripped the iron bolt from my shoulder with my teeth, screaming through the pain. I didn't try to fly. I lunged. I moved with the speed of a striking viper, closing the distance between me and the Duke. I didn't breathe fire. I bit him. The army broke. Seeing their leader snapped in half and the dragon rising, bleeding but furious, the morale shattered. The mages were next from my breath, blackened shadows enveloped in towers of fire. Every time I exhaled, a new wall of flames came between the retreating soldiers and the mountain path. Only the way back to their kingdom remained. "Leave!" I roared, the sound so loud it caused a minor avalanche on the far peak. "Or you all burn!" They ran. They dropped their weapons, their greed for my gold, their dignity, and they ran. I slumped against the rock, my vision blurring. The mage lightning had done damage. I felt small hands on my snout. Elise, look at me." I shifted. It was agonizing, but I needed to hold her. I collapsed onto the stone in my human form, blood soaking my tunic. Seraphina was there, her hands pressing against the wound in my shoulder, tears streaming down her face. "You idiot," she sobbed. "You arrogant, lizard-brained idiot." "I won," I wheezed, grinning through bloody teeth. "Did you see the Duke? Pop." She laughed, a wet, choking sound, and kissed my forehead. "Yes, you won. Now stay still." Recovery took time. Dragon healing is potent, but black iron is poison to us. Seraphina nursed me. She learned to grind herbs, to bandage, to command the magic of the lair, to keep the heat high. We were happy. For years, we were happy. The kingdom assumed I was dead, or that the cost of attacking was too high. They left us alone. We lived in our high tower, 2 queens of the mountain. but there was a thief I could not burn: time. I did not age. My face remained the same as it had for centuries. But Serafina, the years etched lines into the corners of her eyes. Her hair turned from gold to silver. Her joints began to ache when the winter storms hit the peaks. It was a slow, creeping tragedy. 30 years passed. To me, it was a blink of an eye. To her, it was a life. One evening, we sat by the hearth. Serafina was 60 now. She was still beautiful to me, her spirit fierce, her eyes bright, but she moved slowly. She was brushing her hair, her hands trembling slightly. "I can't climb the stairs to the library anymore, Elise," she said softly. I looked up from the map I was studying. A cold fist clenched my heart. "I will carry you. I always carry you." "And when I can't eat?" she asked. "When my mind starts to fade? What then, my dragon?" I stood up and went to her, kneeling at her feet. I rested my head in her lap. "Don't. Elise," she stroked my hair. "I am human. We die. It is our way." "I won't accept it," I said, my voice breaking. "I have hoarded gold for eras, mountains of it. I have magic that can shatter armies. I will not let you go." "You cannot stop death," she whispered. "I can," I said, looking up at her. "There is a way." She paused. "A way?" I stood, pacing the room. "It is forbidden. It is dangerous. It is why dragons do not bond with humans." "Tell me," she said. "The heart bond," I explained. "I can share my essence with you, my blood, my heart." I turned to her. "It would burn away your mortality. It would change you. You would no longer be fully human. You would not be a dragon, but you would be something in between. You would live as long as I do." Serafina looked at her hands, the age spots, the thin skin. "Why haven't you offered this before?" "Because it is agonizing, for both of us. More you than me," I admitted. "And because once it is done, you can never leave me. Your life is tied to mine. If I die, you die. You would be bound to this mountain, to my magic, forever." I looked at her with fear. "I didn't want to trap you. I kidnapped you once. I didn't want to do it again for eternity." Serafina stood up. She walked over to me, her step slow but determined. She took my face in her hands. "Elise," she said, "I stopped being a prisoner the day you brought me here. I chose you against the army. I chose you every day for 30 years. She smiled, and I saw the same defiant smile she had on when she faced the Duke. "I do not want to leave. I do not want to go into the dark without you. I want the eternity." "Are you sure?" I asked, tears spilling from my eyes. "It will hurt." "I know pain," she said, "and I know love. I choose love." The ritual had to be done at the peak of the volcano, under the light of the full moon. We stood on the obsidian rim. The wind was howling, but the heat from the crater below kept us warm. I shifted into my true form, but small, keeping myself compact. I cut my chest with a talon, the thick, glowing magma-like blood welling up. "Drink," I rumbled in her mind. Serafina didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, cupped her hands, and drank the dragon's blood. She gasped, arching her back as the magic hit her. I shifted back to human form instantly, catching her as she fell. Her skin began to glow. She screamed, a sound of pure agony as her body was rewritten. "Stay with me," I cried, holding her tight. "Focus on me, Serafina." Her bones cracked and reshaped. The wrinkles on her face smoothed out, not vanishing, but solidifying into something ageless, like carved marble. Her eyes flew open. The blue was gone. Her eyes were now vertical slits of molten gold, just like mine. Fine, iridescent scales shimmered along her collarbone and down her arms. Her fingernails lengthened into sharp, durable points. The screaming stopped. The glow faded. She lay in my arms, breathing heavily. Steam rose from her skin. "Seraphina," I whispered. She looked up at me. She looked young again, yet ancient. She looked powerful. She smiled, and I saw that her teeth were slightly sharper. "It is warm," she said, her voice resonating with a new, deeper timbre. "I feel the fire." "You are part of the Horde now," I teased, stroking her cheek, feeling the new hardness of the scales there. "Truly, and forever." She sat up, her movements fluid, powerful, the frailty of age burned away by dragon fire. She stood on the edge of the cliff, looking out over the world that had once abused her, the world she had outlived. She turned to me, her golden eyes glowing in the dark. "No, Elise," she said, pulling me close, her grip as strong as iron. "We are the Horde, and we are the queens." She leaned in and kissed me, and for the first time her skin was as hot as mine. I wrapped my arms around her, my princess, my partner, my eternal flame. We had eternity ahead of us, and, looking at the fire in her eyes, I knew the world wasn't ready for the two of us. "Let's go home," she said. "We are home," I replied. And together, under the light of the moon, we unfolded our wings, mine of leather and shadow, hers of new shimmering and golden magic, and we flew.